When Elijah's trial began, it was clear justice wasn't welcome in that courtroom. He stood there, trembling in an oversized shirt, while white jurors whispered about him like he wasn't human. The prosecutor painted him as a dangerous delinquent, a boy born to kill. His defense attorney? A man who had met Elijah once before trial day and didn't even argue for his innocence. Witnesses who could have placed Elijah elsewhere weren't called. No forensic evidence was presented. The trial lasted just 3 days. At the end, the jury took 4 hours to decide Elijah's life wasn't worth saving. Elijah Carter, the judge said coldly, you are hereby sentenced to death by electrocution. Elijah's knees buckled. He was 16 years old, and his life was over. His mother collapsed in the courtroom, screaming, he didn't do it. His father begged for mercy, but their cries were drowned out by the sound of the gavel. The verdict was final. If this story already has your heart racing, pause and subscribe right now. These stories are hard to hear, but they matter. They show us the cost of injustice and the power of truth. Let's keep going, because Elijah's story isn't over yet. On a cold November morning, Elijah was led into the death chamber at Rockview Prison. The electric chair loomed large, a monstrous symbol of fear and finality. A priest whispered prayers while guards strapped the terrified boy down. His last words, in a trembling voice, were, "Please tell my mama I didn't do it." The switch was pulled. The current surged. And just like that, a child's life was stolen. For decades, Elijah's case was buried. The state moved on, and his name faded into a footnote in history. His parents died with broken hearts, and his siblings grew up carrying the shame of a crime their brother never committed. But in the early 2000s, a young law student named Tanya Wilson stumbled across Elijah's case while researching wrongful convictions. Something about the trial documents didn't sit right with her. No evidence. No real confession. No justice. And so, nearly 70 years after Elijah's death, Tanya began to dig. Tanya's research uncovered shocking details. A coerced confession. Elijah's confession was fabricated by police officers desperate to close the case quickly. A suppressed evidence. There was another suspect, an older man working at Glen Mills, who had been quietly transferred out of state after the murder. All-white jury. Elijah never had a fair chance. The jury was chosen to convict him from the start. What Tanya found was more than injustice. It was murder by the state. Armed with evidence, Tanya and her legal team petitioned for Elijah's name to be cleared. At first, the state resisted. It was too long ago, they argued. The past is the past. But Tanya didn't back down. She rallied historians, civil rights activists, and journalists. Elijah's story hit the news, and people were outraged. How could a child be executed without proof? In a groundbreaking decision, Pennsylvania's governor issued a posthumous pardon for Elijah Carter, declaring him innocent. The announcement was emotional, but for Elijah's surviving family, it was bittersweet. Justice came, but far too late. At the pardon ceremony, Elijah's niece, who was named after his mother, stood before cameras and said, "They killed my uncle because of the color of his skin. They buried his name with lies. Today, we dig him up, not just his story, but the truth they tried to erase." The world now knew Elijah's name. He was no longer just a statistic. He was a symbol of a broken system and a call to action. But Tanya wasn't done. While digging through old Glen Mills records, she found something terrifying. Elijah wasn't the only one. Dozens of other files surfaced, showing similar cases. Black children locked away, accused of crimes with no evidence, their names forgotten. Some had vanished without explanation. Others had been executed. And one file, sealed for over 80 years, had a chilling handwritten note. "Do not release. For the safety of the institution." Tanya knew she'd just opened a door that powerful people had kept shut for nearly a century. The fight for Elijah's justice was over. The war for truth had just begun. Tanya Wilson couldn't sleep. Elijah's posthumous pardon had made national news, but her gut told her something wasn't right. Why had this case been buried for so long? Why had no one been punished for framing a 16-year-old boy and killing him? So Tanya did what she always did. She went back to the archives. She spent weeks combing through sealed records, old court documents, and internal memos from Glen Mill School. Then she found it, a dusty folder marked confidential. Inside was a chilling report from the 1930s. Due to rising incidents involving Negro boys, Stronger measures are advised. For the safety of the institution, records of these matters shall remain sealed. Tanya's stomach dropped. This wasn't just one wrongful execution. It was systemic. The Glen Mills School had been open for more than a century, marketed as a reform school for troubled boys. But Tanya's research revealed a horrifying truth. It was a prison for children, many of whom were innocent. Photographs from the 1930s showed children no older than 12 lined up like inmates. Reports detailed beatings, starvation, and secret punishments. Some boys disappeared and were never seen again. Tanya couldn't shake Elijah's terrified face from her mind. How many more Elijahs were out there? In the pile of documents, Tanya noticed a name scribbled on several pages: Warden James R. Huxley. Huxley was the man who ran Glen Mills in the 1930s. But there was no picture of him, no obituary, nothing. It was like he'd been erased from history. Then Tanya found a single newspaper clipping from 1940. Warden Huxley retires amid controversy. The article was vague, but it mentioned ongoing investigations into Glen Mills. Those investigations seemed to vanish, just like Huxley himself. If this has you on edge, pause for a second, hit subscribe, and join the Wealth and Wounds family. These stories don't just entertain, they uncover truths buried for decades. Let's keep going. Tanya shared her findings with her mentor, attorney Victor Delgado, a civil rights lawyer known for taking on powerful institutions. Victor read the files and leaned back in his chair. "This isn't just corruption," he said. "This is a network. Someone worked very hard to bury this." Together, they traced connections between Glen Mills, Pennsylvania state officials, and even local businesses. Huxley had friends in high places, judges, prosecutors, and wealthy donors who funneled money into the school. It wasn't about reform. It was profit. Children like Elijah were cheap labor, used to maintain the massive estate, clean government buildings, and work on farms. Those who resisted were punished, or worse. As Tanya dug deeper, strange things began happening. One evening, she returned to her office to find her files scattered across the floor. Her computer screen was smashed, and a single note was taped to her desk: "Stop digging, or you'll join him." Tanya froze. She knew him meant Elijah, but fear only fueled her determination. The deeper Tanya went, the clearer Elijah's innocence became. Witnesses she tracked down, children who had survived Glen Mills and were now elderly, spoke of Elijah as a quiet, kind boy. One man recalled sneaking Elijah bread on the night he was arrested. "They beat him until he couldn't walk," the man whispered. "He kept saying he didn't do it. I still hear his voice." Another survivor claimed that a senior staff member was seen leaving Margaret Voss's cottage the night of the murder. That man was quietly transferred out of state the next week. His name: James R. Huxley. Tanya visited the abandoned reform school. Its halls were silent, but the peeling paint and rusted bars told their own story. She filmed her exploration for evidence. In one basement room, she found a row of tiny wooden chairs chained to the floor. This was where boys were disciplined. Then she saw something that made her blood run cold: a faded chalkboard covered in names, some crossed out. Elijah's name was there, underlined in red. Below, it was a phrase in faint white chalk: "Justice served." With Victor's help, Tanya leaked her findings to the press. The story went viral overnight. News outlets broadcast images of the abandoned Glen Mills facility and detailed the torture that took place there. But the biggest bombshell was Elijah's innocence, and the evidence suggesting Huxley himself may have killed Margaret Voss. For the first time in nearly a century, the state of Pennsylvania faced public outrage. The governor ordered a new investigation, and the FBI was brought in to comb through records. Within weeks, Tanya received a call. A sealed archive had been found in a private collection belonging to Huxley's descendants. The FBI granted her access. Inside, Tanya found hundreds of documents, photographs, and letters. One letter stood out. October 9, 1931. "Margaret knows too much. Handle it." It was signed by Huxley himself. Tanya had proof that the murder Elijah was executed for was actually a cover-up. Margaret had discovered corruption at the school, and she paid for it with her life. Elijah was framed to silence the scandal. In an emotional press conference, Tanya presented the new evidence. Reporters wept as she showed Elijah's photograph beside the electric chair. His story became a rallying cry for prison reform, juvenile justice, and racial equality. Elijah's great-granny spoke through tears. For 90 years, they called him a murderer. Today, we call him a hero. The governor promised reparations to Elijah's surviving relatives, but Tanya knew this wasn't over. Late one night, Tanya received an anonymous envelope. Inside was a single, yellowed photograph of young boys in Glen Mills uniforms. On the back, a chilling note. Elijah wasn't the only one we buried. Under the note was a list of 10 names. None of them appeared in any official records. Tanya felt a chill run through her spine. She was in deeper than she imagined. This wasn't just a single case. It was a mass cover-up. And someone was still out there, watching her every move. If you thought this story was over, think again. Like, share, and subscribe to Wealth and Wounds, because in part 2 we uncover just how deep this nightmare goes. This isn't history, it's a warning.